I never believed in ghosts or the paranormal until I spent one night at Riverview Asylum. I was 19, a self-confident idiot, and I thought abandoned buildings were just a convenient backdrop for creepy content on YouTube. That night, everything was supposed to be exactly like this. A bit of adrenaline, a clickbait title, a montage of disturbing music. There were three of us, me, Jake, and Sarah. We climbed in through the broken window at about midnight, laughing and joking with each other to drown out the real fear. Inside, the heavy, moist stench of mold and decay assaulted my nose. The building itself seemed to have died long ago and was now slowly decaying from the inside. Our flashlights cut through the thick darkness, highlighting pieces of peeling paint, rusty handrails, old signs with tarnished inscriptions, Ward C and no entry. There were layers of graffiti on the walls, over which old, faded signs and ward numbers still peeked. Each of our steps echoed loudly in the empty corridors. The sound of boots on tiles was too loud, as if we were breaking the silence of a place that was supposed to be silent. Everything was wrongly quiet. There was no wind, no creaking, no howling, just the steady, heavy breathing of each of us. The further we went, the more I wanted to just turn around and say that the cameras were dead and filming was canceled. But Jake was already doing his voiceover. Sarah was holding a second flashlight, filming on her phone. And I, the main initiator of the whole thing, couldn't afford to be the first to chicken out. We reached the stairs and started climbing. There was a crackling sound on every step underfoot, and the concrete seemed brittle, as if one more wrong move and it would crumble. On the second floor, I noticed an old sign, patient rooms 201 to 240. On the third is another one covered with a layer of dirt. Long-term care / high risk. That's where we went, because in the old forums and in urban legends, they always said that the scariest thing is at the top. When we reached the third floor, the air became colder. There didn't seem to be a real draft, but the breath suddenly began to release barely noticeable steam. The corridor stretched forward, illuminated only by our rays. The doors of the wards, torn off in places and ajar in places, were black on both sides, like empty eye sockets. Sarah was walking in front of me and suddenly froze, so abruptly that I almost bumped into her back. "Did you hear that?" "What is it?" she whispered. At first I couldn't hear anything, just my own pulse pounding in my ears. Then the sound was repeated. A low, drawn-out, rhythmic rasp. It was as if someone was slowly tracing metal nails on concrete. The source was somewhere at the end of the corridor in one of the rooms. "Rats," Jake chuckled nervously, but his voice was shaky. Huge, cinematic rats, perfect for watching. The grinding continued, not chaotically, but with a strange, painful monotony. Scrrrip, pause, scrrrip. This sound was not like footsteps or the work of a pipe or the usual house noises. There was something deliberate about him, almost conscious. We moved on, even though everything inside screamed that it was time to stop. The closer we got to the source, the clearer the sound became. I noticed that Sarah had stopped filming and was holding her phone just as an extra light. Her hands were shaking. The door to the right room was already ajar, hanging on one hinge and swaying slightly, as if it had recently been pushed. I lifted the lantern and slowly pushed the door open with my shoulder. The screeching stopped abruptly. The room was practically empty. The bare concrete floor, the scuffed walls, the square of a dark window without glass. The only object that caught my eye was standing right in the center, an old wheelchair. It was turned with its back to us, as if someone was sitting in it and looking at the opposite wall. Neither of us made a sound for several seconds. Even Jake, who usually wouldn't shut up, seemed to have swallowed his tongue. At that moment, the silence was worse than any grinding noise. I could feel cold sweat trickling between my shoulder blades. It's not funny, Sarah breathed, even though none of us were doing anything. I took a step inside. The floor creaked miserably under his shoe. The beam of the flashlight slid across the back of the chair and caught the handles wrapped with cracked black tape. There was something dark and ingrained on one of the wheels, either rust or something else that had dried up. I wanted to walk around the wheelchair and show everything in close-up so that I could insert it into the video as a climax. It was at this moment that the wheelchair began to move. At first, it was barely noticeable, as if she had been slightly pushed from behind. The metal wheels made a soft, familiar creak, and the chair slowly, painfully slowly, began to turn towards us. There was no draft, no hands around, just this old rusty device that turned on its own. "Let's run," Sarah whispered, but her feet seemed rooted to the floor. When the wheelchair was already half turned, something in my head broke. I realized that I didn't want to know who or what was in it. I don't want to see the face. I don't want to live with that knowledge later. Panic replaced curiosity. "Get out of here now!" I shouted, grabbing both of them by the sleeves. We rushed out of the room almost simultaneously. The door hit the wall from our jerk, and the sound of that impact echoed down the hallway. I heard the metal wheels turn sharply a few more centimeters behind me, as if whatever was there was trying to turn around faster. We didn't figure out the path. We just raced down the corridor, tripping over debris, sliding over dust and glass fragments. They almost flew out onto the stairs, taking 2 or 3 steps at a time. Somewhere on the flight between floors, when my heart was about to burst out of my chest, I heard a new one. Footsteps. Someone was running after us. Heavy, fast, unnaturally clear blows on the tile. These steps did not match ours. They sometimes reproduced our rhythm, then overtook it, then suddenly turned out to be closer than they should have been. Neither of us turned around. It was enough for me that I felt as if the air behind my back was being compressed with every step someone else took. When we reached the first floor, the sound of footsteps was already right behind us, literally 2 or 3 meters away. I could almost feel someone else's breath on the back of my neck, although it might have been my own, reflected off the walls. We flew into the corridor, turned to the broken window through which we climbed, and literally fell out, clinging to the shards with our clothes. I fell on the wet grass, skinning my palms. The wind from outside seemed fiercely alive after the rotten, stagnant air inside. Jake and Sarah were already outside. We turned to the building at the same time, as if someone had forced us. A faint, dim light from some distant street lamp was burning in one of the windows. On the 3rd floor, there was a face in that rectangle of gray light, pale, almost white, as if the skin had never seen the sun. It didn't move, it didn't blink, it just looked right at us. The features were blurry, but I could see one thing clearly. A smile, too wide, too stretched, unnaturally fixed, as if the muscles of the face did not understand how to stop properly. I do not know how many seconds we looked at each other. Time has narrowed down to this rectangle of a window and this smile. Then, somewhere behind us, the engine of a car began to howl. I didn't know someone was driving along the road, and the sound broke us out of our stupor. The face in the window did not disappear, did not recede. It just kept looking at us as we stumbled towards the car. Already at home, with trembling hands, I pulled the memory card out of the camera. My fingers slipped, and I dropped it on the floor several times. I didn't look through the material. I knew what was going to happen to him. I knew that I would see more than just empty corridors and an old wheelchair. I will see the moment when she turns around, and what was inside her will finally show us its face. I erased everything, and backups too. I deleted it without regret, with a kind of wild relief. We never returned to Riverview Asylum again. I didn't post this video anywhere. I didn't mention this night, even to friends as a joke. And I still don't tell you what exactly flashed in the camera lens at the moment when the wheelchair turned almost completely towards us and my hand trembled. This frame was enough for 1 second, but this second was enough for me for the rest of my life. Some things are really better left where they belong, along with the dead. Working the graveyard shift at a rural gas station sounds boring, right? That's what I thought too. It was just me, 4 walls, the buzzing of old fluorescent lights, and the occasional trucker stopping for coffee between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. After a few months, the silence stopped being peaceful and started to feel heavy, like the building itself was waiting for something. The store was located on a Highway 47 about 20 miles from the nearest town. No neighbors, no streetlights, just endless black woods on both sides of the road. On clear nights, you could see the stars. On foggy ones, the world ended 3 feet from the glass doors. Most nights I'd see maybe 5 customers total. A couple of truckers, a drunk guy buying cigarettes, some insomniac filling up his tank. I knew most of them by face. I knew their cars. I knew the sound each engine made as it pulled up. That's why that Tuesday felt wrong from the start. It was around 2 a.m., that dead time when even the highway goes quiet, when the man walked in. I didn't hear a car, no engine, no crunch of gravel, no ding from the pump being lifted. The bell over the door chimed once, sharp in the silence, and when I looked up, he was already inside, standing by the candy aisle. He hadn't come from the parking lot. He wore a long black coat that looked too heavy for the season, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. His clothes were dry, even though it had been drizzling on and off all night. He didn't move, didn't browse, just stood perfectly still facing away from me, his hands hanging at his sides. "Can I help you find something?" I called out, trying to sound casual. No response. He didn't even flinch. The security monitors above the counter showed his shape as a dark silhouette, frozen between shelves of brightly colored candy. For a second, I thought maybe the cameras had glitched. The image looked too still, like a paused video. I figured maybe he was drunk or high, so I went back to scrolling on my phone, pretending I wasn't paying attention while watching him from the corner of my eye. 5 minutes passed. He hadn't moved an inch. Not a shift of weight, not a tilt of his head. Nothing. Just that same unnatural stillness, like a mannequin someone had left in the wrong place. I started to feel uneasy, the kind of unease that crawls up your spine and settles at the base of your skull. The store felt colder, even though the thermostat on the wall still read 72. I cleared my throat, stood up from the stool, and walked out from behind the counter. "Sir," I said, forcing my voice not to crack, "the store closes in a few hours if you need." He turned his head toward me. Not his body, just his head, rotating slowly, too slowly, like it was on a rusty swivel. The movement was wrong, but not a natural turn, but a smooth, continuous twist, as if his neck had no bones at all. And when I saw his face, my blood ran cold. He had no eyes. There were no empty sockets, no scars, no bandages. Just smooth, pale skin where his eyes should have been, stretched tight and thin. But he was smiling to us. This wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far across his face, like someone had taken a knife and carved his mouth just a little bit wider than human. The lights above us flickered once. I stopped walking. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get away, to put something solid between us. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Sir, if you're..." My voice died in my throat. He took one step toward me. His shoes made no sound on the cheap tiled floor. The cameras above the counter fuzzed with static for a split second and then cleared, showing him a few inches closer than he should have been. I backed toward the counter, my hand shaking as I reached for the phone. My fingertips brushed the receiver. Before I could dial, he spoke. "You can't leave," he said. His voice sounded wrong. It wasn't just low, it was layered, like several voices speaking at once from inside a metal pipe. There was a scraping quality to it, like the words were being dragged out of him against their will. "Not yet." Then he started walking toward me. Not fast, but deliberate. Each step should have echoed in the empty store, but the only sound I heard was that faint buzz from the failing lights and the soft rattle of the fridge in the back. On the monitor, his body seemed to stutter, like a bad connection. One frame here, the next frame slightly closer than he could have walked. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the counter. My boss always joked, "In case someone tries to rob you." I never thought I'd be holding it because I was afraid of something that didn't have eyes. "Stop right there," I shouted, though my voice cracked halfway through. "I'm calling the police." He didn't stop. When he was about 3 feet away from the counter, close enough that I could see his skin wasn't quite right, too smooth like wax that had been warmed and cooled too many times, the lights went out. Total darkness. Not the kind of dim where you can still see shapes, pure, suffocating black. Even the faint orange glow from the sign outside vanished, like someone had snuffed out the world beyond the glass. I could hear his breathing, slow, raspy, right in front of me. It sounded wet, like each inhale dragged through liquid. He was too close. I could feel a coldness radiating from where he stood, a sharp drop in temperature that made my teeth ache. I swung the bat blindly, putting every ounce of terror into that swing. It connected with something solid, not the hollow thud of hitting a shelf, not the crack of striking the counter. It was a thick, sickening impact, followed by a sound that was almost like a laugh, choked and distorted. The lights flickered back on. I was alone. The store was empty. The aisles were neat. Everything in its place. The door was closed. No one in the parking lot, no car, no footprints on the damp concrete outside. The bat lay on the floor a few inches from my hand. I looked up at the security monitors with my heart hammering in my throat. The camera feeds showed nothing unusual, just an empty store and a very pale cashier staring around like he'd seen a ghost. Then I saw it. On the counter, right where I'd been standing, there was a message written in what looked like ash. Not dust, not marker, not anything that should have been there. Just a dark, smudged line of letters burned into the laminate. See you tomorrow night. The letters were still crumbling around the edges like they had just been written with something hot. My hands went numb. I grabbed the phone, dialed my boss, and tried to sound like I wasn't about to pass out. "Someone broke in," I said. "Something happened. I'm done. I quit. I'm not coming back." He tried to argue, said we could review the tapes, figure out what was going on. I told him he could keep the tapes. I hung up before he finished his sentence. I walked out without even counting the register, without turning off the lights. The parking lot was empty. The woods on either side of the highway loomed like a wall. As I unlocked my car, I had the overwhelming feeling that something was watching me from the tree line, not with eyes, but with attention. I drove home and didn't sleep the rest of the night. A week later, I heard the gas station burn down. They said it was an electrical fire, faulty wiring, old fixtures, something about the fluorescent ballasts. It made the local news for a day. A short clip of blackened walls and charred shelves. The sign out front melted and hanging at an angle. My old boss called me that same night. "They don't understand how fast it spread," he said, voice shaking. "The fire chief said it was like something started burning from the inside out." He paused. "They found something on the counter," he added quietly. "Same place you said that message was." I didn't want to ask. I already knew, but he told me anyway. They said the laminate had bubbled up like it had been exposed to extreme heat, and underneath it, burned into the wood, there were words. You know what they said? I ended the call before he finished the sentence. I turned off my phone and threw it in a drawer, because I already knew. "See you tomorrow night." I moved 3 towns over after that. Got a new number, a new job, a new life. I work day shifts now. I don't go out after dark if I can help it. I avoid highways with long stretches of woods on either side. But some nights around 2 a.m., I wake up for no reason. The room is dark. The house is silent. And for a split second, just before my eyes adjust, I swear I can hear it again. That slow, raspy breathing right next to the bed. And the faintest trace of burned ash in the air, spelling out a promise I don't want to see fulfilled. Last July, my friends and I decided to go camping in the Appalachian Mountains. We'd done it before, nothing fancy, just a tent, some supplies, and a few days away from civilization. It was supposed to be a reset. We'd all been buried in work for months, barely seeing each other, and someone suggested we do what we used to do back in college. Disappear into the woods for a weekend with no phones, no responsibilities, just us and nature. There were 3 of us, me, Mike, and Sarah. Mike was the outdoorsy one, always the first to suggest hiking or camping. Sarah was cautious but adventurous when she trusted the people she was with. And me? I just liked the idea of being somewhere quiet, somewhere the world couldn't reach me. We drove out early on a Friday morning, taking back roads through Virginia until we hit the trail system near the Blue Ridge. The plan was simple. Hike in about 2 miles, set up camp near a stream Mike had found on a map, and spend 2 nights under the stars. No itinerary, no pressure, just exist for a while. We set up camp near a stream, about 2 miles from the nearest marked trail. It was beautiful during the day. Birds singing, sunlight filtering through the trees in golden beams, the smell of pine and damp earth everywhere. The water was clear and cold, rushing over smooth rocks in a way that made you forget the rest of the world existed. Perfect. We spent the afternoon setting up the tent, gathering firewood and joking around like we were kids again. Mike tried to show off by starting the fire without matches and failed spectacularly. Sarah made fun of him until he finally caved and used a lighter. I set up my GoPro on a small tripod near the tent, letting it record passively. I thought maybe I'd make a little montage video later, something to remember the trip by. By the time the sun started to set, we were sitting around a crackling fire with hot dogs on sticks and cheap beer we'd hauled in our packs. It felt good. It felt normal. But when night fell, everything changed. The forest has a way of closing in on you after dark. The trees that looked welcoming in daylight become walls. The shadows stop being empty spaces and start feeling like something you're sharing the woods with. We'd camped before, so we knew this feeling, that slight edge of unease that comes with being outside at night. But this felt different. It was too quiet. The birds had stopped. The insects had stopped. Even the stream seemed quieter, like the forest was holding its breath. Around 10 p.m., we were sitting around the campfire when we heard a voice calling from the woods. It sounded like a child crying for help. At first, I thought I'd imagined it, but then Sarah sat up straight, her face pale in the firelight. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Mike nodded slowly, staring into the darkness beyond the ring of light our fire cast. The crying came again, high-pitched, desperate, the kind of sound that makes your chest tighten instinctively. It was coming from somewhere to the north, maybe 100 yards into the trees. "Hello?" my friend Mike called out, standing up and cupping his hands around his mouth. "Is someone out there? Are you okay?" The crying stopped immediately. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the crackle of the fire and our own breathing. Then, after what felt like forever, but was probably only 5 or 6 seconds, it started again. This time it sounded closer, not by much, but enough that all 3 of us noticed, enough that the hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Should we check it out?" Sarah asked. Though her voice made it clear she didn't want to, I didn't want to either. Every instinct I had was screaming that this was wrong, that we should stay by the fire, that whatever was out there wasn't something we wanted to find. But Mike was already grabbing his flashlight, his face set in that determined way he gets when he thinks he's doing the right thing. "Could be a lost kid," he said. "We can't just ignore it." Against my better judgment, I followed. Sarah hesitated, then grabbed her own flashlight and came with us. We walked about 50 feet into the trees, following the sound. Mike led the way, sweeping his flashlight back and forth across the undergrowth. The beam cut through the darkness in sharp, jittery arcs, illuminating tree trunks and low-hanging branches, but not much else. The crying continued, guiding us deeper, always just out of sight. The forest felt wrong the moment we stepped beyond the firelight. The air was colder, heavier, like we'd crossed into a place we weren't supposed to be. I kept looking back, making sure I could still see the faint glow of our campfire through the trees. Then we reached a small clearing. It was roughly circular, maybe 20 feet across, ringed by tall pines that seemed to lean inward. The ground was covered in a thick carpet of pine needles, and in the center, standing perfectly still, was a little girl. She looked maybe Sue. Her face was wrong. I can't explain it any other way. The proportions were off, like someone had tried to draw a human face from memory but got the details wrong. Her eyes were too far apart, set at angles that didn't quite match. Her nose was too small, almost non-existent. Her mouth was too small for her face until she smiled. And when she smiled, I saw teeth. Too many teeth, sharp and jagged, overlapping in rows like a shark's. Her smile stretched wider than any human smile should, splitting her face nearly to her ears. "Found you," she whispered. Her voice didn't sound like a child's. It was layered, wrong, like multiple voices speaking at once from somewhere deep inside her. We ran. I don't remember the run back to camp clearly, just the sensation of branches whipping across my face, my lungs burning, my legs pumping as fast as they could. Behind us, I heard laughter. Not the laughter of a child, but something wet and choking, echoing through the trees like it was coming from everywhere at once. Sarah screamed something I couldn't make out. Mike was ahead of me, crashing through the underbrush, like his life depended on it. Maybe it did. When we burst back into the clearing where our camp was, the fire was still burning. For a split second, I felt relief we'd made it, we were safe. But that feeling lasted only a moment. "Get in the car," Mike shouted, already tearing down the tent. "Now, we're leaving." We didn't argue. We threw everything we could grab into our packs' sleeping bags, the cooler, whatever we could reach in the chaos. Sarah was crying, her hands shaking so badly she could barely zip her bag. I grabbed my keys and ran for the trail. The hike back to the car took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Every sound made us jump. By the time we reached the parking area and threw our gear into the trunk, all three of us were gasping for air. We drove away without looking back. We didn't talk on the drive home. None of us knew what to say. What could we say? That we'd seen something that couldn't exist? That a little girl with too many teeth had been waiting for us in the woods? The next morning, after a sleepless night on my couch, I checked my phone. I'd forgotten all about the GoPro I'd left recording at the campsite. I didn't even remember leaving it behind until I saw the notification, storage full. My stomach dropped. I opened the file on my laptop, my hands trembling. The footage started normally, us setting up the tent, laughing, making jokes, hours of mundane camping. Then the sun set and the fire came into frame. I fast-forwarded through the boring parts, looking for the moment we left to investigate the crying. There it was, 10:03 p.m. The three of us standing up, grabbing flashlights and walking into the darkness beyond the fire's reach. For a few minutes, the camera just showed the empty campsite, the fire crackling, the tent flap moving slightly in the breeze. Then, at 10:11 p.m., something moved at the edge of the frame. I paused the video, my heart hammering in my chest. I rewound a few seconds and played it again, slower this time. Something crawled out from under my tent. It moved on all fours, but its limbs were wrong, bent at impossible angles, joints bending backward where they shouldn't. Its body was pale and thin, almost skeletal, and its face, it was the same face, the same wrong proportions. The same too wide smile, the same rows of sharp teeth. It crawled into full view of the camera, moving with a jerky, insect-like motion that made my skin crawl. Then it stopped. It turned its head toward the camera slowly, deliberately, and looked directly into the lens. And it waved. Not a normal wave. Its hand twisted at the wrist in a way that shouldn't be possible, fingers splaying out like a spider's legs. The smile never left its face. I closed the laptop so hard I cracked the screen. I deleted the file immediately, emptied the trash, reformatted the SD card. I wanted no trace of it left, but I still see it when I close my eyes. That face, that smile, that wave. We haven't talked about what happened. Mike refuses to even acknowledge it. Sarah blocked both of us on social media and moved to another state. I don't blame her. I haven't been camping since. I don't think I ever will again, because I know now that there are things in the woods, things that wait, things that watch, things that pretend to be what they're not. And once they find you, I don't think they ever really let you go.